Hey, how's it going, network team? I'm over here today with a special guest. We have Ben. He's a Navy veteran and now talent acquisition manager at American Public Media Group. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. I'm sorry about all the in and outs last time we got together.
No worries. I think that was a very good practice round we had. So, it's just all natural conversation. So no worries at all. But yeah, I would love to jump right into it for our network team. We put these live podcasts together for the Pay It Forward just to kind of push forward and let you know you can do anything. It's possible. No worries. Even if you're getting ready to transition out, we have people who have done it before and are doing it now and can give you very good, insightful information.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like I've worked with veterans for a while now, and being a veteran, I feel like there's a certain camaraderie, and it's interesting how we all interact with each other, whether you are in one service or another. There's always the jokes and all of the needling that goes on, but at the end of the day, there is some sense of brotherhood, sisterhood that that we belong to a very small percentage of the population that raised our hands and said, yeah, we'll go, we'll do whatever you want us to do. Right. And so I love talking to people about, careers and where they're at. I can tell my own story. I mean, APMG is in the broadcasting business, and we're one of the largest content producers for public radio. If you ever listen to public radio in your local town, you've probably heard some of our programming. And to be a recruiter bringing in the talent, not only for on air, but all of the marketing and accounting and all of those other types of positions in our organization, right? It's a dream job for me. And, I feel like there's opportunity. We all have an opportunity to redefine what our dream job is and achieve those things. I've been thinking about it a lot since our last conversation, actually, about, what did my service mean to me, right? In terms of shaping me and in terms of who I am and how I look at the world and things like that. And I'll say that most jobs that I've had have been just jobs, right? Most of the time you go, you punch a clock, you collect a check, and, you make some friends along the way, and maybe you move up and enjoy things like that. But the military is a little different, right? It's a different kind of job. Like, you're not just committed from 9 to 5, like it's a 24/7 for depends on what type of job you're in. But I mean, it could be deployed for however long, right? And all those kinds of things. And so while I don't think my military service defines who I am, I definitely think of it as a very important part of my life. And I'm proud of my service. And it's something that I think a lot of us might struggle with in terms of thinking about what you might have done relative to what some other people had to do. And my wife reminded me of this several years ago. It's like, I don't know, maybe some people this will resonate with, but like when you go to a baseball game or a football game or something like that, and they do an appreciation for veterans, and they ask veterans to stand up, right? I used to not really stand up. I used to think like, nah, like, I mean, I didn't really get to do much anything. I didn't go to war. I didn't have to go overseas. Like my service was, pretty, I'll be honest, it was pretty easy. I had a pretty easy gig. But my wife reminded me, she said, you didn't make those choices when you were an 18-year-old kid and you didn't know up from down. Your country asked you, you said, yeah, and you went. And how many other people do you know that went? And I had to think about it. But really, out of my childhood experience, I only can think of like 2 other people that joined the military. And everybody else that I know that was in the military, I met afterwards, right? I met later in life, or while I was in the service or in college, or now even still today, I meet people. But growing up, like, not too many of my friends or neighbors or kids that I grew up with joined. And she reminded me that, your service is your service. The time you put in is the time you put in. And whether Uncle Sam asked you to go to Afghanistan or Guam or stay here in Mississippi, that's what you were asked to do, and you did it, right? And so I took that and I really changed my perspective about what my service meant to me and my life. And I am very proud of what I did. And I still think of it very fondly. And I'm proud of the unit that I was in and all of those kinds of things. And I still also recognize that there are other people who went through much more than I did, right? That they were asked to do much more than I was asked to do. And so I have appreciation for that as well. And so I have some level of understanding when people are looking for career advice coming out of the military. First of all, I would say you need to take some time to separate, decompress, give yourself some distance, right? There's a whole healing process that comes from a military service before you can just jump into civilian world. Like there's a lot of things that you have to unpack in your life, right? Coming back home, it's not the same place that you left, right? That kind of thing. So first, I would say, you got to get your mind right about those kinds of things and understand that the pace is very different. But I would also say keep some of your discipline, right? Keep doing push-ups in the morning and keep making your bed and keep doing the things that remind you that you're here. We've got a mission. You've got goals, things to accomplish, right? And take some of that stuff away. And then you can start really crafting a career for yourself. And that's where I feel like people like me can come in and help.
100%, Ben. And Ben, I'll tell you right now, you've hit on a lot of great points, and I want to commend your wife on that too as well. I think all of us, no matter how much time you serve, you raise your hand and made that commitment, and that's time we don't get back, right? And all of us have that in common. But I do want to chime in and ask you specifically. So last time we chatted, we were talking about figuring life out, let's say after service, and doing different things, because before you said you didn't know who you were. You had to find who Ben was. And I thought about that, and I wanted to ask you, at what point in time did it come in and it was like, I love this, or this is who Ben is? Did you find that identity?
Yeah, so those are two different questions. I found out I started to figure out who I was probably about 10, 15 years ago or so. And just to put things in perspective, I'm almost 52. So I was in my mid 30s and going through what I think most mid 30-year-old people go through. I had a kid and a family and expectations and trying to keep up with the neighbors and all of that, right? And it was definitely a grind. And I just, at that point, I had these huge dreams about, like, I don't know, like I wanted to own a Ferrari. Like that was one of the things that I wanted. Like I thought that was some kind of symbol of success or whatever. And I just got to a point where I was like, that's just absurd. Like even if I had the money, why do I want that? Like what is it about that thing that I want so bad? And I started listening to like what old people say. My wife is a nurse. And so again, put some context around things. And so I got some experience through her work experience around people who are end of life, aging, in memory care, things like that, right? People who are kind of facing the final destination, I guess. And none of them ever say, "Oh man, I wish I had worked more Saturdays." None of them are like, "Oh man, I missed out on so much OT. If only I had put in more overtime, I could have so much more money in the bank." Like nobody says that. People have regrets around, I wish I had spent time with my family. I wish I had spent more time with my kids. I wish I had better relationship with my siblings. I wish I had traveled to more far and distant places. I wish I had taken that risk. I wish I had bungee jumped or whatever, right? People wish for things that they think they missed out on. And once I started to kind of process all that stuff, I thought, well, why wait until you're like 80 or 90 years old? Like at 35 or 40, why can't you enjoy your life and live it like people have been telling us? At least my whole life, it's been, do what you love, the money will follow, that kind of messaging, right? And I thought, okay, well, that's great, but money doesn't seem to be the most important thing. And then I started to do some research, and I think that's important. People need to do the research. You need to do the self-reflection and put the work in, right? I mean, I can tell you what to do, but you actually have to do it if you want to find out who you are. But I started to do some reading and looking at, different films and things on YouTube and things like that, just trying to get as much information as I can. And it turns out that once you get to a certain point of security, you have food, shelter, water, clothing, right? You have your basics, right? You reach a certain threshold, and under that threshold, it's very difficult to find happiness, right? If you don't have food, it's hard to find happiness, right? But if you have those basics, then the next level between basically making it through day to day, and it doesn't matter how much more money you make, the incremental increase in happiness is so small that it's almost immeasurable. And so I started thinking about, like, why am I chasing dollars? Like, what is it about why do I have to have a new car and a huge house? Like, I don't have to have these things. And so my family and I, we sat down together, we started making a plan, and we started really thinking about what was important to us. And in that process of figuring out what was important to us, we also started to figure out who we were as individuals and who we were as a family, and what were our individual goals. And we started talking about, what our hopes and dreams are, things like that. And we set ourselves on a course. Well, that was the first part. That was like laying the foundation, not even knowing that the next thing that was to come was going to really define sort of how I made a transition in my life and in my career. And that happened sort of like around the same time as it did for most Americans and most people around the world during the pandemic. At that point, first of all, like in that very first wave of layoffs, when like 35 million people got laid off that one week, I was in that group of people. So there I was, right? We didn't even know what this disease was yet, and I was out of a job. And it took me a few months. I found a new job, and that was okay. That was good. I mean, I worked through it, and it created its own challenges. And during that whole pandemic period, everybody I seemed to talk to, my friends, my neighbors, my candidates, I don't know, just sort of family, everybody was coming to me saying, I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate my kids, I hate my spouse, I hate everything. Like, I'm angry. What should I do? And the advice I gave then, and what I still believe today, is that you got to find that thing that you loved when you were a kid, whatever it was. You got to find that thing that you were passionate about, that you did when the lights were out, nobody was watching, that you dreamt of, right? When nobody had to encourage you to do it because it was just fun for you, right? For me, I wanted to be a radio disc jockey. When I was a kid, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to spin records. I wanted to be on the air. I thought I was going to do that. And I pursued that. After I finished the military, I went to school in New Mexico. I got my degree in communication and journalism. I worked in broadcasting for about 7 or 8 years. And then I got distracted, right? I wanted to own a house. I had a baby. I had a whole bunch of stuff going on, and I got out of radio entirely. And I transitioned through a whole bunch of other different kinds of jobs, right? And I found myself eventually in recruiting. Recruiting just happened to be another job in a long string of jobs, right? And so I had been doing this for a number of years. And then, I don't know, about a year ago now, this time last summer, I found myself laid off again, right? There was another dip in the economy. The company that I was working for went almost bust. And so they let half the company go. And I found myself feeling really rejected and kind of angry about it. And I told my wife, I was like, that's it. I don't want to be a recruiter anymore. I'm done with this. This is not the life I set out for when I was young. This is not who I planned to be. I'm going to just do something else, right? And I went through, brainstormed a million things of what I was going to do. And she said, that's great. You have my support 100%. But before you go do something else, maybe you should drink some of your own Kool-Aid, right? Find that thing that you're passionate about. And so I started looking for jobs and opportunities. And this role with American Public Media came up. And it was almost like it was meant to be, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. It was kind of, I don't think I got the job because I'm a good recruiter. I think I got the job because I'm passionate about radio and broadcasting, and that's where my heart is. And I think, if you had told me as a 12-year-old that, yeah, you're going to be in radio, you're going to spend your career in radio, but it's not going to be on air, it's going to be in human resources. My 12-year-old self would have told you, get out of here. Like, go away, old man. You know what I mean? But my 52-year-old self is like, hell yeah, I got a ticket to the dance, right? And I feel like anybody can make that happen for themselves. It doesn't matter if you were into trains, or if you wanted to be a cop, or if you wanted to be a ballerina or whatever. There's a million jobs associated with every kind of dream profession. And, we all take amazing skills out of the service, and some of us have civilian careers to back up some additional skills. And I think that, you can set yourself on a course to really fulfill what that childhood passion was. And that'll help you in that journey to figuring out who you are, what's important to you, all those kinds of things.
No, I totally agree with that, Ben. That's a lot of good information. Now, on the thought of too, yeah, I have you here, right? So I got to ask this question because I like to get different perspective from different recruiters and talent acquisition folks when it comes down to resumes. Um, what are some of the things that you look for specifically out of a resume, or what are some of the tips that you may give to the viewers out there in reference to resumes and when they're applying for positions?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'll say, competing information out there on the internet, and there's a lot of companies out there that offer resume services, and they'll charge you money. There's templates that you can get through Microsoft and all of those kinds of things, right? There's just a lot of different ways that you can get to starting your resume. I come from a particular point of view, a particular philosophy that it really needs to be simple. We live in a world now where everything is electronic. It's all data driven. I haven't printed off a resume in years. Like, there's no paper. I don't even have a printer. Like, everything is in the system. It's all on the screen. That's the world that we live in. So some of these templates that you get, they have formatting in them. They have pictures and lines and columns and all that kind of stuff. Don't use any of that. If you want to get a job and you're going to try and apply to jobs on the internet, then those kinds of formatting come through the systems poorly, right? And I've seen this at a lot of different places that I've worked where resumes don't upload properly. And from the candidate's perspective, it seems like, well, I just uploaded everything. Now you want me to type it all in again, right? So I'm sure that everybody has experienced that. Some of that has to do with the way your resume is formatted. On the backside, a lot of times they come in and it's just code. It's not even English anymore by the time I get to see it. And so it's easy to just disqualify a candidate, say delete, 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 right? And especially if I've got a large pool of candidates. So I would say start with just a blank Word document, keep it all very simple, use one size text. It's really important that you differentiate yourself from your competition by explaining your story, right? Not only what you did and where you did it and the work that you did, but you got to qualify and quantify those achievements, right? It's one thing to say, that, you worked on a project that was responsible for something, but what did that something result in? How much money did you save, or did you increase efficiency, or did you increase sales, or, whatever, decrease the amount of time, right? So you got to be able to give those kinds of qualifiers and quantifiers for your achievements. And finally, I would say, you really should only put information in your resume that's relevant to the kind of job that you want. And it's not necessarily a chronological history of everything you've ever done in your life. There are things that I love to do, but I'm not putting them on my resume because I don't want to do them for a job. Like I enjoy doing those things for myself, right? There's things about my job that I do because it's part of my job that I don't really like very much. Well, I don't put those things on my resume either, right? Like I'm not going to tell my future employer that I'm really good at data entry. I hate data entry, but it's a part of my job, right? So I have to do it, right? That kind of thing. So if it's not relevant, then don't put it on there. And I guess I said finally, but finally, I know we don't have time for everything here, but I'll offer myself up for free resume review. So if anybody wants to just connect with me, I don't charge for it. I'll just give you 15, 20 minutes of my time, and I'll tell you what I think about your particular resume and take it or leave it.
100%. And that's honestly, I think the more eyes you can get on it, honestly, the better it'll be. And if it's not some good information for you, or they feel it isn't, then take it with a grain of salt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on cover letters though? Because I get this one is two different rules of thumb, but I'd like to hear your opinion on that one.
So let me see if I can tell it to like this. Okay, so I think of the job search experience is very similar to like the online dating experience, right? So I don't know, you go into online dating and you create your profile. You put in your favorite pictures that think represent you best. You write up a profile that you think tells the best story about you, right? Mm-hmm. That's effectively your resume. That's like your personal resume, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go out and you look for things that meet your criteria. Like, this is what I'm looking for. And the computer matches you up with a bunch of different jobs. That's just like going on to LinkedIn or Monster, and right? It's exactly the same thing that happens there. Yeah. And it tells you, oh, this is a good match. Oh, this is a pretty good match. This one might not be a good match, but we thought it worth showing to you, right? Mm-hmm. And so you get that, right? You get that kind of ranking. Same thing with the jobs. And then you get to click on them, and you might send a personalized note, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that's where your cover letter kind of comes in. I feel like people talk about you should rewrite your resume for every opportunity. It's like, well, would you rewrite your dating profile for every time you wanted to go on a date? No. So write a resume that represents who you are, what your story is. This is what you want to do, right? Mm-hmm. And then use the cover letter as an opportunity to be very specific and address the job, the manager, something about the job. That's a good opportunity to say, I read through the job description. I've applied for the job. I noticed that you're looking for this particular skill set, which is not in my resume, but here's how I've used it. And then you can add that little bit of nuance into your message. Now, again, you don't have time to rewrite an entire cover letter every single time. So that's where I would say write an introductory paragraph, write a conclusion paragraph, and use the middle paragraph to customize or configure so that you can speak directly to that manager. That's how I would do it. I'll also say that for the women that are listening, if there are women that are looking for jobs, don't be shy. Apply. I'll say it over and over again. Statistics have shown over and over that men will apply for jobs that they maybe don't even qualify for it, right? If they have 50, 60% qualifications, they'll apply for it. Women, on the other hand, will wait until they're like 80 or 90% before they feel like they're qualified, before they'll apply for a job. And as a result, men statistically get more jobs than women. So I would just encourage women, if you know that that's how the game is played, just lower your bar and apply to as many jobs as you can.
Understood. And honestly, I rock with that, and I really like your reference on the resume and equation to the dating app. I'm gonna take that one.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So, and people get it, right? I guess, if you've been on a dating app, you understand how that works. It's the same thing. You're finding a job is almost exactly the same exercise.
Yeah, pretty much matchmaking.
Yeah.
So I really do appreciate the time that I have with you. I got one more question I want to ask. And I want to see if you can share any tips or advice for the veterans who are looking to pursue a career in the media or broadcasting industry.
Yeah, there's so many different ways. I'm actually going to a couple of conferences this summer. One of them's in Washington, D.C. One of them's in Birmingham, Alabama. There's one happening right now in Miami, Florida. Various different organizations, right? I'm going to the Asian American Journalists Association, the National Association of Black Journalists. There's the National Association of Hispanic Journalism. There are other organizations within journalism, both local and national, that have to do with every kind of spectrum if you're interested in investigative journalism or things like that, right? So I would certainly seek out all of those professional organizations. Also look at all of the different broadcast companies and try and figure out how to get connected to people on LinkedIn and things like that, right? So if you're interested, whether you want to be on air or just in the back office, or, like me, if you want to be a recruiter in HR, that kind of thing, find people who are currently in those kinds of roles at the kinds of companies that you want to work for, and start to connect and start networking and start figuring out how you can leverage relationships. It's not an overnight exercise. It takes time, but those are probably the best ways. I would say, this business, like every business, is as much about who you know as much as it is about what you know. So.
Very true. Very true. And so, with that being said, network team, I want to say thank you again for tuning in to Pay It Forward. And Ben, if you want to share your contact information, if you want folks to be able to get in contact with you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. I guess you just find me on LinkedIn. It's pretty easy. Just you'll find me. Just LinkedIn. Right. Find me, Ben Passman, American Public Media.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you all next time.
All right, take care.
You too.